Okay, so hello, Dhamma friends. So today also we'll be discussing a sutta. So before that, let's pay homage to the Triple Gem. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, so dear friends, we will be discussing a sutta from Anguttara Nikaya. Okay, so this is the sutta that I'll be discussing with you. The name of the sutta is Nibbedhika Sutta. Nibbedhika means penetrative. It means to see through with wisdom. So there is something that we have to realize with wisdom. So these things have to be penetrated with wisdom to see the real nature. So the Buddha describes these things that we should penetrate with our wisdom, and he explains them. So the Buddha was in Savatthi at that time, in the Jetavana monastery. So he addressed the bhikkhus and he said, I will teach you a penetrative exposition of the teaching. Listen and apply your mind well, I will speak. So the Buddha said, there are these 6 things that should be known, that should be penetrated. So they are sensual pleasures, feelings, perceptions, defilements, deeds or karma, and suffering. These things should be known. So the Buddha said these things should be known, and they are sources. So these are not things that just appear in the world spontaneously. So they appear, they are results of causes. So their sources should be known, their diversity should be known, their results should be known, their cessation should be known, and the practice that leads to their cessation should be known. So for each of these 6 things, sensual pleasures, feelings, perceptions, defilements, deeds, and suffering, these 6 aspects should be realized. That means if you take the first thing that should be penetrated, sensual pleasures. So sensual pleasures should be known, their source should be known, their diversity should be known, their result should be known, their cessation should be known, and the practice that leads to their cessation should be known. So there are these 6 aspects which a disciple, a Buddhist disciple, should consider wisely to penetrate sensual pleasures. And just like that, all these 6 things, sensual pleasures, feelings, perceptions, defilements, deeds, and suffering, these things should be known according to or with regard to these 6 aspects. So let's see how the Buddha explains this. So this is actually a very informative sutta, and it is very helpful to understand the teachings better. And this is a very famous sutta. So the Buddha said, sensual pleasures should be known. and their source, their diversity, their result, cessation, and the practice that leads to their cessation should be known. So the Buddha said, uh, there are these five kinds of sensual stimulation, sights known by the eye, which are likable, desirable, agreeable, pleasant, sensual, and arousing. So there are these sights in the world that people get attached to. They like seeing these sights, and they are likable. They are desirable, agreeable, and beings get attached to these sights, and these sights arouse lust and hatred and delusion, all those unwholesome states in the minds. So, so the Buddha said there are these sights known by the eye, which are likable, desirable, agreeable, pleasant, sensual, and arousing. And also there are sounds known by the ear, smells known by the nose, tastes known by the tongue, touches known by the body, which are likable, desirable, agreeable, pleasant, sensual, and arousing. So you should notice that the Buddha always said sights known by the eye, because sights cannot be known by the ear or tongue or nose or body. Sights can only be known by the eye. Okay, so it's like that. Sounds should be known by the ear. You cannot hear sounds with your eye or nose or tongue or body. So all these five things: sights, sounds, touch, smells, taste, and touch. They are cognized, they are known by these respective sense bases. So there are these particular sights, sounds, smells, taste, and touch in this world, which are likable, desirable, agreeable, pleasant, sensual, and arousing. But the Buddha said something important here. However, these are not sensual pleasures. The Buddha said, in the training of the noble one, they are called kinds of sensual stimulation. Or in Pali, it is said kama guna. So he explained karma or sensuality or sensual pleasures, that is karma. And these five things: sights, sounds, smells, taste, taste, touch. These five things are called karma guna, the things in the world that causes sensual pleasures. So you you should not call sights sensual pleasures, because even an arahant who has removed greed towards sensual pleasures can see these sights, but their feelings are not like they don't feel the sensual pleasures as a normal person would, and their defilements will not get aroused. So the Buddha said here, greedy intention is a person's sensual pleasure. The world's pretty things aren't sensual pleasures. So there are pretty things in the world: sights, sounds, smells, odors, and touch. There are pretty things that beings get attached to, but these things are not sensual pleasures. It is the greedy intention in a person that causes this stimulation. So beings get attached to these sights, sounds, smells, and taste and touch because of this greedy intention. So karma or sensual pleasures means it talks about this greedy intention. So a person can remove this greedy intention and achieve enlightenment, and that person will still see these sights, but they will not get attached to these sights. They will not enjoy the pleasures that a normal person would enjoy with these sights. They will just see these things as sights, sounds. They will hear these sounds, they will smell the odors, but they will not get attached to these things. And they will not find pleasure in these things. So, and their feelings will not get aroused. So the Buddha said, greedy intention is a person's sensual pleasures. The world's pretty things aren't sensual pleasures. Greedy intention is a person's sensual pleasures. The world's pretty things stay just as they are, but the attentive remove desire for them. So this is a famous verse uttered by the Buddha. So uh, the world's pretty things stay just as they are. So they are there in this world. There are sights which are likable, agreeable, pleasant, sensual, and arousing. There are these sights, but an attentive person will understand that sensual pleasures are not these things that are there in the world. It's the greedy intention in a person which will create this illusion, and these people will get attached to these things because of this delusion. So the Buddha said these the pretty things in the world will stay in the world just as they are, but the greedy intention will create this world in a normal person where they will get attached to these things and they will seek pleasure in these sights, sounds, smells, tastes, and touch. So the person who realizes this will remove the greedy intention. And the Buddha said, the world's pretty things stay just as they are, but the attentive remove desire for them. So when they remove desire, they will be free from attachment. In return, they will be free from suffering. So the Buddha said, what is the source of sensual pleasures? Contact is their source. So what is contact? Contact means the the contact of the inner sense bases and the external sense faculties. That means the eye contacts with the sights or form with the consciousness. So the combination of these three, eye, forms or sights, and eye consciousness, the combination of these three is called eye contact. So the combination of ear sounds and ear consciousness is called ear contact. The combination of nose smells or odors and the nose consciousness is called nose contact. Just like that, there is this tongue contact and the body contact and mind contact. So this contact is the source of sensual pleasures. So when there are defilements in a person's mind, they will when contact appears because of this eye, because the contact of eye, sights, and eye consciousness, and because of these defilements and desire, they will seek sensual pleasures. So sensual pleasures are born of contact. So their sensual pleasures are not there in the external world. The pretty things in the world will stay just as they are. Sensual pleasures arise because of contact. So the source of sensual pleasures is contact. So this is something we have to understand. Otherwise, the uninstructed people, that means those who have not learned the teachings of the Buddha, will seek pleasure. They will dedicate their entire life to seek pleasure in the external world. But once they realize that sensual pleasures are not there in the external world, it is this greedy intention which creates this delusion, and people think that the sensual pleasures are there in the external world. But the world's pretty things stay just as they are. It is the greedy intention in a person which is called sensual pleasures, and that is caused as a result of contact. So as long as this contact is defiled with greed, hatred, and delusion, people seek pleasure in the external world, and they get attached to these things, and ultimately they will face suffering. They will not be able to escape from suffering, and they will be attached to this cycle of rebirth. So, so the Buddha said the source of sensual pleasures is called contact, and there is diversity of the sensual pleasures, which has to be understood, which should be realized. So the Buddha said the sensual desire for sights, sensual desire for sounds, sensual desire for smells, sensual desire for tastes, and sensual desire for touch are all different. This is the diversity. So sights, sounds, smells, tastes, and touch, these five external faculties are separate, because sights can only be known by the eye, sounds can only be known by the ear, smells can only be known by the nose, tastes can only be known by uh, the tongue, and touch can only be known by the body. So these five things in the world, in this world, are different, and the sensual desire for these things, the desires are different. So the sensual desire for sight, sensual desire for sound, sensual desire for smells, taste, and touch are all different. This is called the diversity of sensual pleasures. So to understand the entire spectrum of sensual pleasures, this has to be understood. So that's why the Buddha said that the diversity of sensual pleasures should be realized and understood. And the result of sensual pleasure. So there is a result of sensual pleasures. When one who desires sensual pleasures create a corresponding incarnation, partaking of either good or bad deeds. That means when people are attached, when the beings are attached to the sensual pleasures, they will do actions with body, speech, and mind, and as a result of that, they'll be born in different worlds. So there will be a future birth, a rebirth, because of this sensual pleasures. So it can be good or bad, because when the beings are attached to the sensual pleasures, they will do actions which are good and bad, and as a result of these actions, they will have to face the results of these actions, and uh, will have to exist in this cycle of rebirth, and they will be born in another realm. So this is the result of sensual pleasures. The cessation of sensual pleasures is the cessation of contact. So when that contact ceases, sensual pleasures cease. So that is why it is very reasonable for the Buddha's disciples to let go of sensual pleasures and develop uh, meditation and improve the contact. So when a person is in a deep meditation, there is a contact which is free from these sensual pleasures, and this contact will also provide feelings and perceptions which are different, and they are in a more superior state. So the the beings who have developed meditation and escape from sensual pleasures will be reborn in Brahma worlds. They will exceed the normal state of a being, a human or a deity. So even deities, devas, they are attached to sensual pleasures. But when somebody develops meditation and improves their contact, and as a result of that, they will be born in the Brahma world. Uh, so the cessation of sensual pleasures is the cessation of contact. The practice that leads to the cessation of sensual pleasures is simply this noble eightfold path. So it is important that in order to understand that in order to escape from sensual pleasures and the causes sensual pleasures, one has to develop the noble eightfold path. That is the path leading to the cessation of suffering. Right view, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. So, as I mentioned previously in a previous class, Bhikkhu Sujato. So, this is a translation of Bhikkhu Sujato. They use the word immersion to describe samadhi, but uh, I prefer the word concentration because if you we discussed once Chula Vedala Sutta. In that sutta, this bhikkhuni named Dhammadinna, she explained what is concentration, what is samadhi. So that the way she explained is the focus one has towards wholesome thoughts. So so the word focus is there, ekaggata. So the better word is concentration, not immersion. So for some reason, because Sujato has used the word immersion, but if you look at Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation, he used the word concentration. So, so we will use the word concentration for that. When a noble disciple understands sensual pleasures in this way, he understands their source, diversity, result, cessation, and the practice that leads to the cessation. They understand that this penetrative spiritual life is the cessation of sensual pleasures. So, a noble disciple will understand the cessation of sensual pleasures and will understand the penetrative spiritual life. That means the spiritual life that he has to fulfill in order to penetrate sensual pleasures and escape from sensual pleasures. So, so in this way, the Buddha said, he explained sensual pleasures, their source, their diversity, their results, their cessation, and the practice that leads to their cessation. And the next thing we should know is feelings and all the six aspects of it. Feelings, their source, diversity, result, cessation, and the practice that leads to their cessation. So, so there are these three feelings: pleasant feeling, painful, unpleasant feeling, and neutral feeling. So these are the three types of feelings. Uh, so what is the source of feelings? Again, contact. Contact is the combination of the inner sense bases and the external sense faculties with their respective consciousness. So, so there is this eye consciousness. So when the eye forms and the eye consciousness contact, they combine, that is called eye contact. So likewise, there is this eye contact, ear contact, nose contact, tongue contact, body contact, and mind contact. So contact is their source. That is a source of feelings. What is the diversity of feelings? So let's see the Pali word. So the Buddha used the word samisa and niramisa. The way uh, the way Bhikkhu Sujato has translated this is kind of not clear. But if you read the Pali word, samisa means uh, uh, feelings that arise as a result of these sensual pleasures. So when somebody is enjoying these sensual pleasures, that person is having these feelings. They are having uh, pleasant feelings with respect to these sensual pleasures. And also, when somebody is attached to these sensual pleasures, when these sensual pleasures change, that person will have to go through painful feelings. But these painful feelings are also uh, arise with respect to this sensual realm, right? So these are called samisa vedana, samisa feelings, the feelings uh, that are um, connected with the realm of sensual pleasures. Samisa. Niramisa means when somebody abandons sensual pleasures and practice meditation, they will also, these disciples of the Buddha will practice meditation and they will also experience feelings, pleasant feelings when they develop the meditation. And these feelings are not connected with the sensual pleasures because that person has already abandoned the sensual pleasures. So this person who is developing meditation is experiencing this pleasant feeling, and that feeling is called niramisa. And also there are niramisa unpleasant feelings. That means when somebody is developing meditation, and if he cannot get to that stage of uh, concentration in the meditation, he feels sad because he's trying hard to develop meditation, but there are hindrances that block his development in the meditation. So he has to go through some pain, some suffering to develop his meditation. But that suffering is not connected with the realm of sensuality. So there is also unpleasant feeling there, but that unpleasant feeling is called niramisa, not connected with sensual pleasures. So Bhikkhu Sujato used the word flesh, but the word flesh does not have anything to do with this. Actually, it's wrong. So he's good for the most part, but there are some places where the translator has made, these hasn't done the translation properly. Because the word samisa is also used to describe a bait. When a fisherman he uses a bait to attract the fish, so that is also called samisa because that uh, that fisherman attracts the fish since that fish has the desire for sensual pleasure. So he gives a bait. So that bait is also called samisa. So that's why he has used the word flesh here. But in this context, samisa means connected with sensual pleasures. Niramis means disconnected from sensual pleasures. So the Buddha said there are these pleasant feelings connected with sensual pleasures, pleasant feelings that are not connected to sensual pleasures, painful feelings connected to sensual pleasures, painful feelings not connected to sensual pleasures, neutral feelings connected to sensual pleasures, and neutral feelings not connected to sensual pleasures. So this is called the diversity of feelings. So those who have not experienced meditation and the happiness in that meditation, they do not understand that there are these pleasant feelings that can be experienced. In their eyes, they only see the happiness in sensual pleasure. So they do not understand the benefit of meditation. But in order to realize the noble truths and escape from suffering, one has to realize the entire scope of feelings, the diversity of feelings. So one has to understand that there are these feelings disconnected from these sensual pleasures, and they are wholesome. And the Buddha praised these feelings because these feelings will give rise to wholesome qualities. So, what is the result of feelings? The Buddha said, when one who feels creates a corresponding incarnation, partaking of either good or bad deeds. That means when these beings feel these feelings, they they feel these feelings with attachment, of course. So, because of this, there will be a future rebirth, which will arise as a result of karma. So they will do actions because they are attached to these feelings. So these feelings will create a corresponding rebirth in another realm. So this is called the result of feelings. So what is the cessation of feelings? When contact ceases, feelings cease. So the cessation of contact is the cessation of feelings. The practice that leads to the cessation of feelings is simply the Noble Eightfold Path. So when somebody develops the Noble Eightfold Path, contact will cease, and they'll be free from feelings, and the result of the feelings, they'll be free from rebirth. So when somebody understands feelings in this way, the Buddha said they understand this penetrative spiritual life, and that will lead to the cessation of feelings. So likewise, feelings should be known, their source, their diversity, result, cessation, and the practice that leads to their cessation should be known. And then the Buddha explains perceptions. Perception means when we see things, we recognize. We recognize colors and shapes and people. So, and also we recognize sounds, smells, and all the external faculties. So, perception should be known. Their source, their diversity, result, cessation, and practice should be known. So the Buddha said there are these six perceptions: perceptions of sights, sounds, smells, tastes, touches, and ideas or mental objects. Right. So we, when we see things, we recognize. When we hear sounds, we recognize. So we perceive. So this is called perception, and the cause of perception is contact. And there is this diversity of perceptions. The diversity is the perceptions of sights, sounds, smells, tastes, touch, and ideas are all different. These perceptions are different. So when we see things, we recognize. we perceive. That is a different perception. When we hear sounds, we recognize these sounds. That's a different perception. And when we smell odors, uh, we recognize or we perceive. That's a different perception. So in that way, all these perceptions are different. So this is the diversity of perceptions. The result of perception is communication. This is very important. So we communicate as a result of our perception. So in a society where there are people, when they see things, when they hear sounds, uh, they they communicate what they see, what they recognize. They use words, they use sounds to describe that perception. In that way, in a society, a language is formed. So it takes a long time uh, for language to get formed, and all the languages in the world evolve with time. So when people perceive things, they will describe that. They will try to communicate that with with words, with sounds. And when other people hear these sounds, they will also get that perception. So perception is the cause of communication or language in a society. So that is one of the reasons why the Buddha used words to describe his realization. So the Buddha didn't hear words from any teacher. He realized the noble truths by himself. But he explained his realization with words to other people. So now even we as disciples, we are learning the words of the Buddha. So all these words are they are in the world. The Buddha didn't invent these words. These words were formed in the society, okay, as a result of perception. So the Buddha used these words to describe his understanding, and others can hear these words or read these words and understand their meaning. So so that meaning is also a perception. That means when somebody realizes the noble truths, that is also a perception. So we try to understand what is impermanent as impermanent, right? So the problem with the normal people in the world is that they are attached to things that are impermanent, thinking that they are permanent. So they perceive things as permanent, but the real nature is that they are impermanent. So when the Buddha teaches Dhamma in words, those who are wise will understand the meaning, and will perceive things as they really are. They will perceive the nature of impermanence, the nature of suffering, and the nature of non-self. So they are able to do that because the Buddha used these words in a normal language in the society to describe the Dhamma. And when those who are wise, when they hear these words, they can get that perception, the wholesome perception. That is because perception, or as a result of perception, communication or language is formed in the world. So communication is the result of perception. So the Buddha said, you communicate something in whatever manner you perceive it, saying, this is what I perceived. So when you say something, you actually say something that you perceived. You use words to describe something you perceived. Okay? So you're saying, this is what I perceived. That's what you're saying. When you're using words, you're conveying other people, this is what I perceived. So you're using words to describe a perception. That's how communication is formed. So communication is the result of perception. So this is actually very important to understand the Dhamma. So result of perception is communication. So what is the cessation of perception? Contact, when contact ceases, perception ceases. The practice that leads to the cessation of perception is simply the Noble Eightfold Path. So when a noble disciple understands perception in this way, they understand the penetrative spiritual life that leads to the cessation of perception. So the Buddha said, perception should be known, their source should be known, their diversity, result, cessation, and the practice that leads to the cessation should be known. Defilements, asava, defilements, and their source, their diversity, result, cessation, and the practice that leads to the cessation should be known. So three asavas, three defilements: defilements of sensuality, desire to be reborn, and ignorance. Kamasavu, bhavasavu, avijjasavu. Defilement of sensual desire, sensuality, defilements with regard to the desire to be reborn, and defilements with regard to ignorance. So the source of defilements is ignorance itself. Ignorance is the source of defilements. Avijja bhikkhave asavanam nidana sambhavo. So ignorance is the source of defilements. The diversity of defilements. So this is important. There are defilements that lead to rebirth in hell. There are defilements that lead to rebirth in the animal realm. There are defilements that lead to rebirth in the ghost realm, the human world, and the worlds of the gods. So this is called the diversity of defilements. The result of defilements. When one who is ignorant creates a corresponding incarnation, partaking of either good or bad deeds, this is called the result of defilements. So as a result of defilements, one will be reborn in different worlds, different realms. So this is the result of defilements. So this is exactly why we should abandon these defilements and purify our minds. Cessation of defilements is when ignorance ceases, when avijja, ignorance ceases, defilements cease. And the practice that leads to cessation of defilements is simply the Noble Eightfold Path. So when somebody understands this, they understand the penetrative spiritual life that ceases defilements. So the Buddha said, defilements should be known, their source, diversity, result, cessation, and the practice that leads to their cessation should be known. And then comes karma. Kammang bhikkave veditabam. Deeds should be known, their source, diversity, result, cessation, and practice that leads to their cessation should be known. So here the Buddha said, what is karma? It is intention that I call thee. So the Buddha said, Chetanahang bhikkhave kammang vadami. So this is a very famous statement of the Buddha. So, but nobody knows from where it comes. So it comes from this sutta, Nibbedhika Sutta in Anguttara Nikaya. Chetanahang bhikkhave kammang vadami. It is intention that I call deeds. So you need intention to generate karma. Without intention, karma is not formed. So intention is karma. For after making a choice, one acts. So you need to have the intention before uh, doing a deed. Right? So they act. The beings in this world, they act by way of body, speech, and mind. Chetayitva kammam karoti kayena vachaya manasa. Having made a choice, or having an intention, they do actions by way of body, speech, and mind. So, what is the source of deeds? Contact. Contact is the source of deeds. It's very difficult to escape from contact because the sense bases always contact with the external sense faculties. Uh, so, but if somebody develops noble eightfold path, contact will cease. Diversity of deeds. There are deeds that lead to rebirth in hell, the animal world, ghost world, human world, and world of the gods. Atibhikkhave kammam niraya vedaniya. That means, vedaniya means that gives feelings. So, karma, when somebody does an action, that karma will give results in one of these worlds, either the animal realm or the hell world or the ghost world or the human world or the deva world. When this uh, this karma gives results, actually that will give feelings that that person will have to feel. So if a person is born in hell, that hell being will have to feel unpleasant feelings and suffering in that world. When a being is born in a heavenly world, that being will experience pleasant feelings as a result of contact in that world. So this karma will give feelings in respective worlds. So this is called the diversity of deeds. There are deeds that will give feelings in in the hell world. There are deeds or karma that give feelings in the animal world, or the ghost world, the human world, and the world of the gods. So this is called the diversity of deeds. So what is the result of deeds? The Buddha said the result of deeds is threefold. Tividang Tividahang bhikkhave kammanang vipakang vadami. Kammanang vipakang. Results of karma. Dittheva dhammi upapajjeva apareva paryayi. So most of us have learned this in, in like those who are Buddhists usually know this from their childhood. So there are these three types of karma: ditta dhamma vedaniya, upajja vedaniya, and aparaparya vedaniya. So that is also mentioned in this sutta. Ditta dhamma vedaniya means karma that gives result in this very life. Upajja vedaniya means karma that will give result in the next life. And aparaparya vedaniya means karma that will give results in some later time in the future, in a future rebirth. This is called the results of deeds. So what is the cessation of deeds? When contact ceases, karma ceases. And the practice that leads to the cessation of deeds is simply the Noble Eightfold Path. So the Noble Eightfold Path is a very powerful path, taking the practitioner to the end of suffering. So it was founded by the Buddha. So deeds should be known, their source, diversity, result, cessation, and the practice that leads to the cessation should be known. And then comes the last part. Suffering should be known, its source, diversity, result, cessation, and the practice that leads to its cessation should be known. So what is suffering? The Buddha explained. Birth is suffering, old age is suffering, illness is suffering, death is suffering, sorrow, lamentation, pain, sadness, and distress are suffering. Not getting what you wish for is suffering. In brief, the five grasping aggregates are suffering. Jatipi dukkha, jarapi dukkha, vyadipi dukkha, maranampi dukkha. Soka parideva dukkha domanasupaya sapi dukkha, yampichang nalabaditampi dukkha, sankittena panchupadana kanda dukkha. This is a famous quote from Mahasatipatthana Sutta. So even in that sutta, suffering was explained like that. So what is the source of suffering? Craving, tanha, craving. Even in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the very first sutta, the inaugural discourse of the Buddha, he explained that craving is the cause of suffering. So what is the diversity? There is suffering that is severe, mild, slow to fade, and quick to fade. Ati bhikkave dukkhanam adimattam, ati parittam, ati danda viragi, ati kippa viragi. So adimattam means severe suffering. Parittam means mild suffering. Danda viragi means there are these sufferings. It takes time to get detached. Viragi means to get detached. So it is not slow to fade. Actually, this translation is faulty. Danda viragi means it takes time. Danda means slow. It is slow to get detached from these sufferings. That means beings are so attached. And there are these sufferings, kippa viragi, that is, it is kind of easy to detach, to get detached from that suffering. Kippa viragi. Quick to be released from, right? Or quick, it's easier. Beings can easily abandon the attachment to that suffering. But there are these certain aspects of suffering which takes time to get detached from. So this is called the diversity of suffering. Okay. And what is the result of suffering? When someone who is overcome and overwhelmed by suffering sorrows and wails and laments, beating their breasts and falling into confusion. So when they experience suffering, they become confused. Okay? They cry, they lament, they wail. So this is the result of suffering. So when you see somebody crying, you should understand that this is a result of suffering. So as a result of suffering, they have to go through these lamentations. That is because they are overwhelmed by suffering. Or else, overcome by that suffering, they begin an external search, wondering, who knows, one or two phrases to stop this suffering. So they will go searching for somebody to say something to them to make them free from suffering. Is there anybody who knows a mantra or a chanting or a blessing to say, to tell me, so that I'll be free from suffering? So he or she will wander in the world. They will become. They will search for for salvation. Okay, so they will search the external world, wondering, who knows, one or two phrases to stop this suffering. So this is the result of suffering. So the Buddha said the result of suffering is either confusion or a search. Okay, so either they will become confused or they will search. Is there a way to escape from this suffering? Is there anybody who knows a teaching to teach me to escape from suffering? So even the Bodhisattva, He searched for the end of suffering. In his final birth as Prince Siddhartha, he abandoned the palace, searching for the end of suffering. And he associated these two teachers, Alara Kalam and Uddakaramaputta, to learn if they knew something to teach him to escape from suffering. But they did not. So he abandoned that two teachers and he practiced on his own in search of the end of suffering. So search is a result of suffering. This is called the result of suffering. And what is the cessation of suffering? When craving ceases, suffering ceases. So a lot of people are so confused, they don't understand that they have to remove craving to escape from suffering. So they do not practice the Noble Eightfold Path. Because those who want to purify their minds from craving, they have to practice the Noble Eightfold Path. So the practice that leads to the cessation of suffering is simply the Noble Eightfold Path. So when a noble disciple understands suffering in this way, they understand that this penetrative spiritual life is the cessation of suffering. So they understand the spiritual life, the penetrative spiritual life to end suffering. So the Buddha said suffering should be known, its source, diversity, result, cessation, and practice that leads to its cessation should be known. So the Buddha said this is the penetrative exposition of the teaching. So he explained these six things: sensual pleasures, feelings, perceptions, uh, karma, defilements, and suffering. Okay, and all these six things should be penetrated with respect to these six aspects. These six things should be known. There are cause, there are diversity, their cessation, their result, and the path leading to their cessation. So they should be penetrated with respect to these six aspects. So there ends the sutta, Nibbedhika Sutta. So I think you should go through this sutta again and again because it's a very important and uh, a sutta which describes this Dhamma in a profound manner. So, so it is very good to learn this sutta. So, I think uh, we will finish for today, and we'll be able to learn another sutta next week. So, thank you for joining. May you all be well and happy. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.